Hi, I'm Leann Findley Maxwell. Welcome to Panther City Partners, the podcast. I am a personal growth and development coach working specifically with people going through life's transitions. And today I'm so excited to have my friend Analiese Hill here with me today. Analiese and I met years ago when I had just graduated from college, and we were in her cousin's wedding. Her cousin is one of my best friends from college. And so we met that way, and we did a bunch of fun, wedding things that weekend. You were how old were you at the time?
Eighth grade.
Eighth grade. Okay, that's what I was thinking, 13. Yeah. And then later in life, when I moved back to Fort Worth and my kids started going to the Spanish schoolhouse, we were at the Meet the Teacher night, and my daughter was sitting at a table, and I looked up and I was like, Analiese? And she said, Leann? And here we are now, friends with kids the same age and going through life in this crazy world, but trying to do it together in a way that is good and feels good and right for us. So if you would like to introduce yourself a little bit more about who you are and what you do, Analiese, that'd be great.
Cool. Thanks, Leann. Yeah, 8th grade.
Yeah.
Feels like a different life, that wedding.
It was.
I don't remember all those activities. I just remember being at the wedding.
Oh, okay. We had a shower at your aunt's house out by the pool. Anna's. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here.
I feel so fortunate to have been asked to do this with you. I'm from Fort Worth, born and raised, and I went to college at UT in Austin.
Longhorns. We're both Longhorns.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And
I'm a little before your time.
Slightly before my time. Maybe a decade. Maybe not.
At least, yeah.
And then I traveled after college and came home and had a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was, I guess, 4,
yeah,
we were at the Spanish schoolhouse.
Yeah.
So at that time, I have a degree in social work, but I had started teaching school.
That is another parallel.
Yes,
we both have backgrounds in
right.
education.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really early childhood. So I started teaching kindergarten, and then I moved up to 5th grade and 6th grade and did some Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a wondersome spirit. I love to travel and I love to be free. And I felt like teaching in public school was, for me personally, it was a challenge to be a parent and be there all the time and have the work at home. And to, even though you get those months off in the summertime,
right,
it's a lot all day, every day. Plus, I think this is even stronger for me, was the ideological understanding of such a strong system that we put our children into, that felt punitive often.
Right.
And
especially for boys. We both have boys.
Especially for boys. And I had a hard time being a part of that.
Right.
And just the masses of people flowing in this one direction that nobody's really changing or thinking about how to do it differently. And I read a book at the time called Dumbing Us Down, and it was just a really interesting eye opener about how to look at the system and think, how can we do this differently? People put their kids in private school. If they're fortunate enough to do that, which not everybody is,
of us are, right?
Most of us aren't. Some people homeschool, and some other than that, or they charter,
right? And some of us can't homeschool.
Right.
Intellectually, it sounds like a great idea, but the day in and day out, I have the utmost respect for people who homeschool.
I do too.
I love my children, and I want them to keep loving me, and I want to keep loving them. And I'm pretty sure we spent all day, every day together.
You need space.
We would not.
Yeah. So I read that book, and I just thought, I really would like to focus on alternative education. And what does that mean? And I've always been drawn to children, and I've always worked with kids. As a teenager, I was doing camps in my backyard, and I counseled different camps. And
what fun!
Yeah, I was always working with kids. I had younger cousins, and so I wanted to be able to do that, but it's hard. It was hard to know in what direction to go. And I had a friend who would be a fun person to have on the podcast. Her name's Charlotte Salmons, and she was, at the time, it was ICE, and we went way back, and she was doing this farm school.
I remember you doing that.
And
yeah.
so I left teaching and went to work at her
Mhm.
farm school, and she works with special needs children and on her property.
Mhm.
And we, I spent a summer out there with Oliver, learning from her
Yeah.
and working with these kids and exploring in the creek. And
Yeah.
I was like, this is it. This
Right.
is what I want to do. I
Right.
want to just be outside, be with kids in natural ways,
Mhm.
help them connect to themselves, help them connect to nature, to each other.
Mhm.
And I didn't feel like that was happening. I don't feel like that happens in school.
Right.
I feel like school is really challenging because the teachers have such a high demand to get these kids to perform in certain ways
Right.
academically, that there's not a lot of, and more is happening all the time, but there's not a lot of, they don't prioritize social emotional health.
Right. And you might find pockets of schools or teachers that do, but as a system, you're right. That's not happening.
And of course, it's now on people's mind, and they are trying, in the counseling departments, they're really trying to incorporate that. And even yoga, I mean, yoga is entering schools, but it, it's kind of a sloth rate. It doesn't happen
you're
fast.
a yoga instructor too.
Right. So around, actually around the time that I started working in Charlotte, I started studying yoga, and I had been studying meditation for a while, probably like at that point since college. So
yeah,
at that point it was 6 or 7 years, and so yoga was the natural
progression.
And I had a teacher that was, she had been my teacher for a few years, and she was doing a teacher training, and so I did her teacher training and became a teacher. But I was always with kids,
right?
So the natural thing was to just start teaching kids immediately. And I didn't actually do a kids teacher training, so I'm not certified to teach children officially.
Oh, okay.
I have my teacher certification to teach in public school, or in any, I have I'm Texas certified, and I'm a certified yoga teacher.
Okay.
And so
you just melded the two.
I was just like, why do I need to spend another? Plus, that's a whole nother area that we could talk about.
Right.
I mean, I'm a single mom. Oliver's dad lives in South America. He's never been a part of our life here, and so I'm a sole provider. And to do the yoga teacher training itself was, thousands of dollars.
Right. And time.
And lots of time. Lots and lots of time. Like days away. And then to have to do it either online or, to do more training, that yoga is a privilege, to be quite honest with you. And if you go to India, and people will say this, you don't just go into a yoga studio. They don't really exist like that. So people that do yoga in India, they are part of ashrams, or they, it's just inherited through their experiences in life. But
it's not used as like a form of exercise like
or release, or there's not these schools that you can be a part of, and it's a pretty trendy thing here. And especially if you're a person of privilege, which I am lucky to be, a white Caucasian person of privilege,
with a little bit of money and income.
My parents supported me and my kid when after he was born, and so I was able to take that path. And it's been challenging because you don't make a lot of money as a yoga teacher, and that's okay, because the beauty of it is that you're rich internally and solid internally, and it takes time to get there. Because like any endeavor that you go down, like there's this transition period of, okay, I'm gonna leave this super solid thing that I know as a profession, as teacher, and with your teacher retirement, and that was a really big thing with my family.
I was gonna ask about that, like taking that, because I've done that before too. Like I have a great job, and then I'm like, I'm gonna leave it and try something new. And my family, even my spouse, sometimes is like, I love you, but what are you doing? And so maybe talk a little bit about that, like that transition of like what people on the outside see as stable and secure, and then you're saying, it is stable and secure in some ways, but it's not stable and secure in the way, and secure in the ways that I'm wanting. So what does it look like, and how did your family react when you were like, I'm gonna give up that full-time job?
Well, it was a transition. And we're still transitioning. Life has changed. It's the only thing that stays the same.
Right.
So
that's what I say. The only thing constant is change, but you don't have to go it alone.
Yeah, you don't. And so My mom's a teacher. My grandfather was a teacher, superintendent. My mom just is retiring from her like 30-year career as a teacher and principal. My brother's a teacher. My dad's, lawyer. He represents superintendents, and everybody is stable.
Yeah.
They have these jobs, and I've always been a little bit more out of the box. My nickname is Bird, and so I felt caged in a lot.
Sure.
And it's taken some work to figure out how to open my cage and spread my wings. So when I left my first teaching job, I was going to go work with Charlotte, and then I got scooped up by another teaching job, and I had to make this decision. They helped me make that decision, and I got another job at a private school. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll try this private school setting.
And things will be different
maybe
there.
Things are more alternative, and at the time I was going through a whole nother transition with Oliver's dad, and he had come and visited for the first time, and I was like, well, maybe we'll just go back to South America.
Right.
So I didn't stay with that job. I stayed for a year.
Okay.
And when I did decide to leave, my family we were in a really tight, sticky situation because we were going to I was taking my son, who they've been helping me raise for the past 4 years, almost 5 now at this point. I mean, he's 8 now, but
at that point,
and we were going to go to South America to be with his father, who hadn't been around.
Right.
And my family did not see the value in that, and they were very upset and felt really betrayed, I think, and really hurt that I would choose that. And it's always been hard for them to see my perspective.
Sure.
So we didn't end up doing that. It was very, that transition was really painful.
Sure.
For all of us. It was painful for Oliver. He didn't want to go. He didn't know.
Right.
And I was going to take him down there, and my family's very upset, and his dad's trying to, and their family wants us there, but my family wants us here, and what do you do? And, of course, there's privilege all wrapped up in that too.
Because you have those choices.
Right. And he doesn't necessarily to come here. But I ended up not going. And
so what made you decide not to go, if you don't mind me asking?
I did. It comes back to the flow of life. So, and this is the biggest lesson I learned from that. When something is right, it's not always easy, but it's right because it feels relieving. The truth is a relief. And so I had been fighting that reality that it wasn't right to stay here and not acknowledge this other life that we have down in South America. But it wasn't right to go there because I hadn't really fully done that on my own. It was like he had come, and then I had been wrapped up in it, and then I was getting pulled back down. Right. And so the decision not to leave was because it wasn't my decision. Right? So whenever you're going down a path and people are pulling you in all these ways, you're like, where do I go when I'm on the whatever that game is? Tug of rope.
Yeah, tug of war.
Tug of war. And who's winning? And then finally I'm just going to cut the rope and not do either party. Right. I'm going to just go home for a little while.
Yeah, and it can be really hard to I think about that movie, The Runaway Bride. I know that's silly. No. But Julia Roberts is in this movie, and she's every single time she's with a new man, she likes her eggs a different way. Or, she just does whatever they like. And not just in a relationship, but as a romantic relationship. But I feel like that happens in other parts of our lives where we're like, oh, this is what everyone's doing, so that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Right. And so you don't always have that time to create or to figure out what is in your own mind and in your own heart. Yeah. So how were you able to step back? You cut the rope to not be pulled in either direction. But, was it your yoga practice or meditation that helped you really I'm going to figure out what I want here?
To be honest, probably I was a part of a circle of women that we met every week on the phone. It was a really cool prosperity circle. And I would do it again in a heartbeat. We don't have time to go into it now, but it's another interesting thing to talk about.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that.
I think they're called prosperity circles. And some of my women friends there, we would check in every week about it. And then outside of the weekly call, we would have different conversations. And one of my really good friends, her name is Tovia. She's a beautiful woman in Mexico. I think she might be in Colorado now. And she said that to me, Analiese, if it was right, it would be easy to make this decision for you. It would feel right. And so that was when I finally heard it and made the choice. I felt such relief that I was like, oh my God, yes. Okay, finally I get it. Like, I'm relieved to not have to do this. And I also didn't tell my parents for a while because I didn't want them to feel like they had won the battle,
right,
or whatever.
Right.
You
You
sounds
still
so
you needed to sit with
but
your own decision for a little while and let it be just yours.
And there was pain around it, and there was shame and embarrassment and all sorts of things for being wishy-washy and pulling people on my having people spinning their wheels because of my choices. And can't I just be clear with what I want? And it's like, well, when you're used to doing what everybody else wants and you're raised as a pleaser, then
so many of us are, especially women.
Yes, then you're gonna do what other people want, especially if it's a powerful dude that's like has you're attracted to and you have a kid with and history and all those things. So at that point I kind of took a step back and I started practicing yoga. I started teaching yoga and I dove into that, and I was still restless for a little while. And then I had kind of a rock bottom experience. We were trying to go to Cuba.
Okay. You and Ollie, your son.
The year after. And so I had been independent for a year, and I was following all these different entrepreneurial endeavors. And I have a good friend that does trips to Guatemala and trips to Cuba. Okay. And he does educational trips, and they're socially conscious. And so it was attractive to me. And I was like, well, maybe we'll do a trip to Cuba, and then I can bring it back to the community. And and take kids, people from schools. And so we get to the airport in Fort Lauderdale, and Oliver's passport was expired. So children's passports expire every 5 years, not 10.
That's a very good tip for those of us who travel.
I can't remember what age it starts to be different, but so we had
they change so much in the 5 years, so they have to have new pictures and stuff. Right.
Exactly. And it had like just expired that May, and it was July 3rd, and we couldn't travel. We couldn't go anywhere. It was July 3rd. We're in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Couldn't get any expedited because the next day was a national holiday. And so my parents had to bail me out, and they did. They got us a hotel in Miami, and we stayed for a couple of days on the beach, figuring things out. And then we traveled through the Keys a little bit, and kind of just did that. And then we went to Colorado and spent some time in Colorado with my cousin. And after that trip, it was just like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, I can't, it's not even, things are just so up in the air all the time, and seeking, and not feeling grounded, and not feeling like you really have a goal that you're trying to reach. And
that's really hard.
It is
emotionally
hard.
and physically.
Right. Yeah. And you have this kid who's watching you do it all.
Right.
And he's like, what
and they're
is
always
happening?
watching.
I know. They never miss it. You don't miss any mistakes, believe me. So after that, I came back, and that was just, I got pretty down after that.
Sure. And, that makes perfect sense.
It does, but it was also a beautiful thing to be like, okay, you get knocked on your ass because you're trying all these different things. You're trying to live a life. You don't, it's elusive. You're like, I know I feel this way when I follow that thing, or I want this kind of freedom, but like, where is it? And do I have to be do I have to have my own business, or what business do I want to have, or whose business do I want to invest my time in and like give my services to? And do I just want to piecemeal everything together forever? And just lots of way more questions than answers. Way more questions.
And that can happen when you're following a feeling. I mean, like you said, it's elusive. Like, there's a feeling out there, and you felt it before, and so you're trying to capture it again. But where am I going to capture it? Right. Rather than, and ultimately, I mean, it feels like you found it within you.
That's right. Hey, all those texts that I had read for years. It's like, you can't, I mean, that's the essence of everything. You can go anywhere in the world, but if you don't deal with your own stuff, it's always going to be there.
Wherever you go, there you are.
Wherever you go. But it's hard to deal with your own things unless you have somebody there that's willing to walk it with you.
Sure.
And that's kind of where the next phase of life happened. I have two really amazing people that took me under their wing, and just for the last year and a half, took us step by step, me and Ollie, through Yeah, they're everything from sobriety to dealing with toxic family situations, boundaries, parenting, relationships, all those things, work, and really owning my work. It's like, okay, cool. You're going to be a yoga teacher, teach. Let's do it. If you're going to work in ministry, do it. You know, if you're going to work with kids, how do you want to do it? And so focusing on that and really prioritizing. So the last year and a half have been, I've got settled in a studio. Yeah. And I teach a weekly children's class there, and a weekly adult class. And then summer's always different, transitions. Right. Of course, because kids are out and I'm out and about, and summer looks different when you're an educator. So a lot of my income comes from private clients.
Okay. Private yoga?
No. Well, yes, but education. Oh, okay. So homeschooling, special needs children that are in transition. Right. Okay. So my last client was moving. Her family was moving, and she had graduated from elementary, needed to go to intermediate, but wasn't going to do it until she got to her new home. Okay. And so there was a year that they needed education. Right. Okay. So I homeschooled her, and currently have a client who is leaving one elementary school, going to another because the family moved, special needs. They, so that is where a lot of the bulk comes from. Right. Which it's hard to explain that to people. Sure. What do you do? Well, let's see. I know. I have I homeschool children. I teach private yoga to children and their parents. I teach weekly kids classes, weekly adult classes. I work with children at a church, which is super progressive and awesome. First Congregational, freaking love it. If I'm ever going to go to a church, that's going to be the one. Would have never been something I was into, but they found me and can you do this?
You know, this makes me think of I've had other people on before talking about, you know, when we grow up, we're taught that there are certain jobs, and you go to school and you get a college degree. Most people that I know get a college degree, and then you start working and you work in that field. You know, that's what my parents did. That's what my husband does now. But being someone who does have wanderlust, you know, I don't like to sit in the same thing all the time. To know even that there are opportunities that you can piece a career together, and it doesn't always look the exact same. That it's not following the same path that everyone else has done. But that's totally fine. And it's working for you.
And bringing it back to that book, it's what we have to do. Right. We have to do that. How are we going to get past the problems that we have as a society? How are we going to get past the massive deforestation and the terrible situations with trash and war and all these? And if we follow the same path, right? You know, no, you got to think differently. You got to wrestle with yourself and wrestle with your spirit and what is calling you, and do that, and to think about others. That was you know, a really big eye-opener with my support system this past year and a half is privilege. It's so privileged to flop around and
to even get to have these conversations where we wrestle with what do we really want to be doing.
Right. And so how can we create different paths so that other people can see it, and to bring voice to other people's realities, which for most of the world aren't very linear. You know? Right. Most people aren't following a career path. They're going to college.
Piecing it together as they go, and they're taking this job for a little while, and then they're taking that job or these 3 jobs, and trying to figure out what they're going to do with their kids while they're working these 3 jobs. So this makes me think about, and you've kind of a little bit touched on this, but in all of this time of you trying to figure out your path and find that feeling again, how was Ollie dealing with all that?
Yeah, so last year was really about me kind of grounding, and this year's about him doing it. You know, when you turn 7, so in the spiritual world, they say that when you turn 7, that's when everything from before life or before you're born, from other dimensions or whatever, you know, you believe, when that kind of innate awareness goes away, and is replaced or just masked by our right now very very solid reality in the material world. Right. So he has kind of come to more heavy-heartedness sometimes. It looks like he'll call me out on a lot of things, but he also is hard on himself. So he gets upset with himself and will, say things that are worrisome.
Yeah. I've been dealing with that with Walker the past couple of years.
It's hard.
It's
hard because you wouldn't ever let somebody say that to you. I would never let somebody say that to him. In fact, we left school because he wasn't being well treated. He didn't feel safe, essentially. And why are we going to stay somewhere where we don't, where every day sucks? No, I'm not going to do that. So we'll try something different. So it looked like for a long time, for probably, let's see, once I kind of settled with myself and doing what we were saying in the last year and a half about, it looked like his resistance to that was fighting me like it had always been. And then I started being consistent with consequences. So a lot of love and logic stuff. So, oh, bummer, I'm sorry you chose to, you
can make a different choice tomorrow.
Throw a fit because you didn't want to wear your helmet. I guess we just aren't going to ride the bike today. Or that kind of thing. And then he got a lot of his toys taken away and he had to earn them back. And then once we kind of settled those really hard emotions that happened all the time, it's so hard to deal with as a single parent and as a parent in general. Like the fits are something I'm just like, how do people do this?
But then to have to know that there's no one coming home at 6 o'clock to take over here.
And how do you get them to stay in their room and without being mean or putting your hands on him and so that's just a big journey. So it's looked like a lot of resistance, and then it looked like familial changes. So I really took ownership into my own hands for a long time and really didn't let anybody take care of him but me. So put on a lot of weight onto myself, but a lot of control, because I needed to take a step back from everything to evaluate why was this emotional roller coaster so intense. I mean, obviously a lot of it is me because I'm his natural caregiver and I'm emotionally, up and down, and I'm a feeler. So
highly sensitive and
so he's getting that. And then so I took control into my own hands, started being really consistent with consequences, bedtime, eating, sugar, screen time, toys, friends.
And that's so hard to do.
Holy moly.
Anytime you do it, but especially if the kid hasn't necessarily had all of that consistency, but to now I'm thinking of my own children, like throwing it on them and what are you doing to me is the things that I hear sometimes. Like, what? I'm not doing this to you.
This is unnecessary. Well, so I was reading the other day, and I can't remember what it was that I was reading, but when you're a lackadaisical parent or laissez-faire parent, when they're young, you give a lot of space. Then the older they get, it's like a V. It's an upside down V. The older they get, the tighter you have to become. Because when they become teenagers, the stakes are much higher, and then you're having to squeeze them. Which that was my life. I think I was, I don't know, I was a super wild teen. I don't know why. I mean, I probably do, but I don't need to go into it. And then, okay, so and then the other way is that when they're young, it's the V right side up.
So you squeeze them when they're young to give them the space when they're older.
And it's not even squeezing; it's like giving them one or two choices, one or two choices, one, and then they learn how to have choices that are.
And they learn to set their own boundaries, and they learn that boundaries are essential, and that they're there to protect you and.
So we started doing all that work, and he's doing well. So through that was the experience of starting to listen to him and his relationships at school, and really starting to hear like, things aren't great, and I'm gonna listen to you, and I'm gonna hear you, and
not just do what I think is right.
Or I've had these conversations with the teachers, and I've had the conversations with kids, and well, I guess let's try something else. And he's like, no, I don't want to. And I'm like, well, sorry. Like, that's what we're going to do now. He says, I'm going to make this decision. So I did, and I pulled him out of school. I homeschooled him for 3 months. And luckily I had been teaching. Oh, there's another job. I teach Spanish. Gotcha. And so I pulled him into the homeschool co-op there where I was teaching Spanish, and he did really well there. And just to know that there's other options always out there, right? So that's part of this whole thing is, gosh, we just have to wipe away those little cobwebs and like just see with clear eyes. See, wow, this space exists that we're in right now. Yeah. I had no idea.
Never even been here before.
Or that this was happening. This is, so to wipe those away. And then this summer, I've put him in. So we didn't do anything full day for months to give him a break. Right. Which reset his system. He had been twitching and doing weird things, and it just all reset. And now we're doing full days again. So he's in the swim team and climbing camp, and he's exhausted, but he's building stamina. He's building a little bit more resilience and grit.
Yeah,
and those
are the important qualities that you're really wanting to instill in him, which goes back to not doing the traditional path. Right. That the traditional path doesn't always focus on those kinds of skills for our kids. Yes, it's important to get those academic skills, but these other skills like grit and perseverance and resilience and dealing with big emotions are super important for our kids.
Because otherwise, those emotions are going to be there.
Right.
And are we going to, I don't know, how are you going to deal with it through anger and explosions or through temper tantrums or through zoning and what do you call it?
Right, desensitizing.
And watching TV for hours, or when you're older, whatever escapes. Right. That we get into when we're teens.
I think that what you've talked about here today, Analiese, is so important because it's not that you just, you're coming to this from a place of like understanding that you need to get yourself in a place where you can be that for your son, and help him get into a place where he can be that for himself. Right. Setting the boundaries for Ollie, it was also about Analiese setting the boundaries for Analiese. And what does that look like? And now, what do I want to model for my kid so that he can be the type of person that is important for me or for you, for him to be as he grows up. But you did have to go through a bunch of transitions to get to the place where you felt like you were ready to do that with him.
And I still want to go through more transitions.
Sure. I mean, you can't avoid them.
No, I want to. We're in them right now. It's summertime, and the employment during summer looks totally different. Yeah. So we've been up at Summit Climbing Gym for the last 2 weeks because I got a teaching gig there.
Oh, awesome.
And, so that's a whole new world, and like going vertical and this is a whole different experience. And so or going on vacations and also something that happens during the summertime is that, you just go.
Oh my gosh, I know.
And
Findley, my daughter is always asking me, can we just stay home today? Right. That's hard for me because I like to go. And it's hard for me to my 8-year-old is setting boundaries for our family, saying things like, Mom, can we just stay home today? I'm like, oh, yeah, we can.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times we can't.
Right. I mean, it's a Sunday.
Oh, good. Yes, I work on Sundays too. It is a challenge. It is a challenge. So that was another thing I was going to bring up, which is that when you are constantly going, or you are just in a life that's busy like we all are, that to teach myself and to teach him and to teach the other children that I'm working with all the time, when there is a moment of stillness, to really pay attention, to really let it be there, because you can savor that, and you can slow down time and really feel a lot in a moment.
Well, yeah, that's a really good point, because we are in such a busy world and our lives are all so busy that we can't often, like you just said, you can't often not go and do. But when you do take that time, when there is a small space, it doesn't have to be an entire day. It can be a small 15 minutes or space that you can say, okay, I'm going to stop for now and really capture this moment and be here and be present and be mindful, so that when I do have to leave in 15 minutes, I can go, but have that feeling of,
I had a little rest.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. You have such great stories and interesting, I think one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is because I think it is important for people to understand that there's not just one path, and that, you know, this non-traditional way of either raising our kids or being in the world or working, all these different jobs. I do that too. It's important for people to see that that is an option out there. And if they're lucky enough, like we are, to be able to harness that and be a part of it. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's very fun. It's very interesting. There's hardly any dull moments, and also I do think that sometimes we're just not in control as much. You can set the intention and to have something that you want, and something else comes along.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, going with that
just
flow.
Try to go with what's right for you,
and that ease.
Trying to,
yeah. That's a great way to stop. To just go with that flow and try to have that ease when you can.
Right, to have the ease when you can, and even in the flow. Because you can loosen up. I mean, just sitting here, like you can like loosen your jaw. Okay, I can like loosen my eyes a little bit. I can find release in the going.
Right.
As well. That's the beauty of yoga and meditation. It can happen anywhere.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. And I want to thank our listeners so much. The podcast has been doing really well. I appreciate all of your support and all of your shares and downloads and subscribing and likes. So please continue to do that on the podcast platforms, but also on Instagram. Please follow me at Panther City Partners. We appreciate you. And remember, the only constant is change, but you don't have to go it alone.